In today's workshop, we'll look at creating a very simple VR application with Unity using the Oculus SDK. So this assumes that you have an Oculus Rift or Rift S headset, as well as you have Unity installed. In this workshop, I'm going to be using 2019.2.8, but pretty much any version of Unity should be fine. And to just take a look at what we're going to be making today, it's very simple, but this will be a no-code workshop, and no Unity experience is required, but it would be good to have a basic understanding of what a game object is and stuff like that. And so yeah, we just have a very simple scene where you can see your hands, look around in VR, and grab an interactable object in VR. To get started, make sure you've created a new Unity project and set it up for 3D. Also make sure that you have the Oculus app running and that in your Oculus account you have set allow unknown sources to true. This will allow Unity to natively display your project in the headset. First thing you want to do is hit File, Build Settings, Player Settings, and open up this window. This just changes some default settings for the project. And you want to scroll down to XR settings and check Virtual Reality supported. This might freeze your computer for a second, but this will just make it so that you can actually use the VR mode within Unity. Once that's done, we're going to want to get the Oculus SDK from the Asset Store. So you can go ahead and close those windows and navigate to the Asset Store tab right here, and just search for the Oculus Integration asset. Should be this first one. And go ahead and install or import or whatever it says. Once it's downloaded, hit import. And you're going to see a small pop-up like this. Just hit import again. If you get any pop-ups telling you to update plugins, just hit yes. And the Unity editor will likely have to restart after this. Now that we're back in Unity, we can begin setting up our scene. To start off, we're going to delete the main camera since the VR character that we're going to add is going to have its own camera object. We're also going to add a plane, just so that our character has something to walk on. I'm going to set the position up here to just 0, 0, 0. And now we're going to create some material so everything is not just one color. So to create a material, right-click on the Assets portion of the screen and hit Create Material. So we'll call this brown. And over here, set the albedo. It will bring up a color picker, and you can just choose any color. So I'm just going to choose brown, and I'll apply that to this floor. I'm going to create another material, which is just a darker brown. And now I'm just going to create a small table that we can put an object on. And so to do that, I'm just going to create a cube and place that in the scene. Okay, now we're going to add our character. The Oculus SDK comes pre-packaged with some prefabs. So one of them is in Oculus VR prefabs, and it's going to be the second one right here. It says OVR camera rig right here. And so you can just drag this directly into the scene. I'm going to put it kind of right in front of our table. I'm also going to reset its Y position right here. So I'm going to set the Y position to 0. I believe if I hit play, it should work now. So let me try. Okay, I actually had to go restart my computer. When I hit play, it was basically not feeding into the headset. So if the same thing happens to you, I'd recommend restarting your computer, and then it works fine. One thing I did notice is that putting this camera right here is actually way too close to the ground, so I'm going to back mine up and just put it a decent amount higher. And so you should be able to see now if I put on the headset. Yep, so I can look around. I'm still a bit short, so I'm going to adjust that in a second. But I can't see my hands, but other than that, I can actually look around and see the little scene that we just made. So now we're going to make the hands basically. So Oculus has this kind kind of built-in system called their avatar system. And so we're just going to leverage some of the stuff they have made in their SDK for that. So I'm going to go to Oculus, Avatar, and then Content and Prefabs. And we have this local avatar, which is basically going to have the hands in it. So in order to use this, I'm going to go over to the hierarchy and expand this OVR camera rig until we have this tracking space. And then just drag this local avatar directly as a child of the tracking space. So it'll appear right here, basically. So now we should be able to see our hands theoretically if we were to hit play. And depending on the version of Unity you're using, you might be able to hit play and see your hands, but Oculus kind of updated their SDK so that each app requires an app ID, but you don't actually need to go register an app ID as long as you come up to this Oculus window right here and hit avatars and then edit settings. It should open up right here. It just wants you to add in your app ID, and if you just put in an app ID of 0, it will allow you to see your hands, basically. If you were to actually publish an application, you should probably go register an app ID and stuff like that. But in order to see our hands just for this tutorial, we're just going to set that to 0. And if I hit play, yep, so there we go. We should be able to see our hands, and there we go. Got our hands, and the gesture stuff is working, so as you move your fingers between buttons, it's got the correct hand formations. And so, of course, the next step is to create an actual grippable object. So in order to create a grippable object, we're going to start by setting up the hands for gripping. So most importantly of these two objects right here, left hand anchor and right hand anchor. If you click on one and hold shift or control and click on the other, you should be able to see, you should be able to select both at the same time. Once you have both the left hand anchor and right hand anchor selected, come over here to the components inspector tab and hit add component and add a sphere collider. This will basically allow the Unity physics system to use the hands as colliders. We're going to set the radius to be 0.075, so this is fairly small since the hands are fairly small. And then we're going to set them to trigger so that you can actually still use your hands, and they'll basically be able to go through walls, but trigger just sets up the physics system so that it will still send the messages. We're also going to add a rigid body component, so add a rigid body and then uncheck use gravity. Rigid body is another component of the Unity physics system. Finally, we're going to add an OVR grabber. So if you type OVR grabber, so this is not something that's built into Unity. This is a script that's a part of the Oculus SDK, and this basically just provides the base grabber functionality. So we've basically just done that to both the left hand and right hand anchor. If you select each individually, you'll see all those changes. But we need to do some specific changes on each object. So click on the left hand anchor and come over here to controller and hit L touch if you're using the touch controllers, which you probably are. That will basically set up the control bindings to default work with the touch controllers. Next, we want to set this grip transform and grab volumes field. So I'm going to just come over here to the left hand anchor and just drag this directly into the transform field. As well as set the size to grab volumes to 1, and again just drag the left hand anchor in here. So this will set the transform and sphere collider associated with this left hand anchor to the grabber script, basically. And on the right hand anchor we're going to do the same thing. So I'm going to drag this into the grip transform. I'm going to set the grab volumes to 1 and drag that in there, and I'm going to set the controller to R touch. So the hands are actually pretty much configured to grip objects now, but we don't have anything to grab, of course. So I'm going to come over to this table. I'm going to create a new object. So I'm going to create a sphere. That is down there. So I'm going to just position this on top of the table and scale it way down. So by default, if you hit create sphere, it will come with a sphere collider. So we don't need to add a sphere collider, but we do want to interact with the Unity physics system. So let's go ahead and add a rigid body. We don't need to uncheck use gravity because we can have this thing be gravity enabled. And all we need to do to this is also add an OVR grabbable. So this basically sets this object as grabbable, and it allows for some default behavior for basically how does it get grabbed. So if we go ahead and hit play, so I cannot reach this, and I can't move, so hold on. I'm going to go ahead and move my controller a bit closer. Alright, let's try that. Yep, there we go. So I've got my hand. I can squeeze to grip, and if I put it over here and grab, then there we go. We have a simple grabbable object, and it is physics enabled. So if I let go, it will actually drop. I can throw it, and there you go. So that actually concludes the main part of the tutorial. Obviously, this is a pretty simple experience, but it's kind of cool that you can get this up and running with basically no Unity experience and no coding experience. I'll quickly talk about prefabs real quick, which is a very useful Unity feature. So I'm going to go ahead and just scale this table real quick so we can add more balls. So let's say we wanted to basically have a bunch of balls and we were making some sort of basketball game. We could, of course, just come over here to this sphere. I'm going to name it ball real quick and just copy it, paste it, and then move it. And then let's say we decide this is a bit small, so we want to come over to this first ball and basically scale it up. Well, now we would have to go and change our other ball that we just made a copy of as well, which would be really annoying. So there's basically a way to designate an object as like a master object and then create a bunch of instances of that object. So I'm going to delete this second ball and come down to our assets tab over here, and to create a prefab in Unity, you just take a game object and drag it into the assets tab like this, and so now you see we actually have a ball asset. And so what this means is that we've created a prefab of the ball, and we can use this like an object, so we can place it in the scene and position it however we want. And you see it has the same size and stuff as the original ball. And if we click on any of these balls and then change some property of them, so for example the scale, so I'm going to resize this one. If we hit, we come over to scale and we hit apply to prefab ball, that will basically apply this change that we made. You can see that we've made a change to the prefab because it's in bold. So if we hit right click, apply to prefab ball, all our balls in the scene have now grown. So I'm going to undo that real quick. But I can also basically come down here to the prefab in the assets tab and change everything in here. So if I change this, then the balls are now scaled in the x-axis. I could change their properties. I could add scripts, basically do everything I would need here. So I'm going to go ahead and create a material. And then apply it in here. So if I come in here and set the default material to orange, and there we go, now we have an orange ball. And if I go in game, now we have the 3 balls, and they're all physics enabled, so I can actually throw them against each other. And yeah, from here, a decent amount of Unity knowledge will go a long way. The Oculus SDK is fairly limited, and it, from what I can tell, only targets Oculus headsets. So in the future, we'll do some workshops that allow you to target multiple headsets, as well as explore some libraries that have a lot of default VR functionality made. So Oculus comes with some stuff like this OVR camera rig, and it comes with a little bit of a basic grip system, but there's a library that we'll be looking at that comes with a much more advanced grip system that has a lot more done for you, so you can easily create VR interactions.